In 1915, in a chemistry laboratory in Honolulu, Hawaii, a 23-year-old woman solved one of the most stubborn problems in the history of infectious disease. She was dead within a year. And within 3 years of her death, her name had been removed from her own discovery. What happened next? How her name was taken, how it survived at all, and how it was eventually recovered, is the story we came here to tell. If you were with us for episode 1, you heard me mention her name. You heard it again when we closed episode 3. I told you she was a 23-year-old chemist who solved a problem the world had given up on, and that her name was quietly erased from her own discovery. I said quietly. That was charitable. Welcome back to the Lab Rat Chronicles. My name is Darwin, and I was there. To understand what Alice Ball did, you first need to understand what leprosy meant in 1915. Hansen's disease, caused by the slow-growing bacterium Mycobacterium leprae, had been known since antiquity. By the early 20th century, its cause had been identified. What had not been identified was any reliable treatment. In the territory of Hawaii, a diagnosis of leprosy did not just mean illness. It meant removal. Patients were taken from their homes and transported first to Kalihi Hospital in Honolulu, a receiving and assessment facility, and then, when their cases were deemed unlikely to resolve, to a permanent isolation settlement on the north shore of Molokai Island. The settlement was called Kalaupapa. Kalaupapa sat on a peninsula flanked on 3 sides by the Pacific Ocean and on the 4th by sea cliffs that rank among the highest in the world. It was not a metaphorical exile. There was no road out. Patients who escaped were tracked and returned. The state of Hawaii did not abolish its forced quarantine laws until 1969. For the people sent to Kalaupapa, a diagnosis of leprosy was a second ending. Not just of health, but of every relationship, every future, every ordinary thing. The only treatment available, Chaulmoogra oil, derived from the seeds of the Hydnocarpus whitianus tree, used in traditional medicine across India and China for centuries, did not work well enough to change that. Taken orally, it caused violent nausea. Applied as an ointment, its viscosity prevented absorption. Injected in raw form, it ulcerated the skin. The oil had potential. No one had found a way to make it usable. Harry T. Holman, the assistant surgeon at Hawaii's Leprosy Investigation Station, believed the answer was chemical. The oil needed to be modified at the molecular level before it could be safely injected. He needed a chemist. In 1915, he read a master's thesis from the College of Hawaii on the chemical properties of the kava plant, Piper methysticum. The work was precise, elegant, and built on an unusually sophisticated grasp of fatty acid chemistry. The thesis had been written by Alice Augusta Ball. Alice Ball was born in Seattle, Washington in 1892. She had earned 2 bachelor's degrees from the University of Washington, one in pharmaceutical chemistry, one in pharmacy, before arriving at the College of Hawaii as a graduate student in 1914. By June 1915, she had become the first woman and the first Black American to earn a master's degree in chemistry from that institution. The college immediately appointed her as its first female chemistry instructor. She was 23 years old. When Holman contacted her, Ball was already teaching full-time. The Chalmugra research happened in parallel, conducted off-duty, without additional pay, alongside her regular responsibilities. The problem she was handed was a genuine chemical puzzle. Chalmugra oil's active components, chalmugric acid and hydrocarpic acid, were present in the oil, but locked in a molecular form the human body could not efficiently absorb. The raw oil was too thick, too reactive, too unstable to inject cleanly. Ball's approach was methodical. She isolated the two main fatty acid components of the oil. She then converted those fatty acids into their ethyl ester form, a process called ethyl esterification, which rendered them water-soluble and pharmacologically stable. The result was a compound that could be injected without ulceration, absorbed efficiently by the body, and tolerated by patients over repeated courses of treatment. She had not merely reformulated a folk remedy. She had performed original synthetic chemistry on a compound that had resisted every previous attempt at clinical modification. Holman tested her treatment. Patients improved. Cases that had been considered hopeless became manageable. Some patients, in a settlement where the only previous exit had been death, were discharged. Alice Ball had given the people of Kalaupapa a way home. She did not live to see it. I want to say something before we go further. The phrase, "she did not live to see it," gets used often in these stories, and it can start to sound like a figure of speech. It is not a figure of speech here. Alice Ball died on December 31st, 1916. She was 24 years old. She had become ill during her work at the College of Hawaii and returned to Seattle for treatment in the fall of that year. The cause of her death was never officially confirmed. Her death certificate lists tuberculosis. A Honolulu newspaper reported at the time that her illness may have resulted from chlorine gas exposure during a laboratory demonstration she was conducting. The college denied that account. We do not know. We know only that she was 24, and that she died without publishing a single line of her Chalmugra research. That absence, unpublished, undocumented in her own hand, is what made what came next possible. In the years after Alice Ball's death, her research did not disappear. It was used. Arthur L. Dean, a chemist with a doctorate from Yale University, who was at various points head of the chemistry department and later president of the College of Hawaii, took up Ball's work. He produced the injectable Chalmugra extract at scale in the college's chemistry laboratory and shipped it to physicians and government agencies domestically and abroad. In 1920, Dean and his colleague Richard Renshaw published a paper in the Journal of the American Chemical Society, titled Fractionation of Chalmugra Oil, presenting the extraction methodology Ball had developed. Alice Ball was not mentioned. 2 years later, in 1922, the same two men published again, this time in Public Health Reports. Again, the work was documented. Again, Alice Ball was not named. The technique became known as the Dean method. Meanwhile, that same year, 1922, Harry T. Holman published a paper of his own. It appeared in the Archives of Dermatology and Syphilology. In it, he documented the outcomes of 84 patients treated with the injectable Chalmugra extract, all of whom had become bacteriologically negative, free from active lesions, and had been discharged from isolation. And then Holman did something that has no parallel in this story. He named in print who had made it possible. He wrote, "After a great amount of experimental work, Miss Ball solved the problem for me by making the ethyl esters of the fatty acids found in chalmugra oil." And then, addressing Dean's version of events directly, Holman added that he could not see any improvement whatsoever over the original method as worked out by Miss Ball. In a single paper, in a single year, Holman named her, credited her, and called out the theft. He did it on the record, in a peer-reviewed journal, in language that left no ambiguity. That paper, one paper in one journal, was the only thing standing between Alice Ball and complete erasure from the scientific record. For the next 5 decades, the Ball method largely vanished from medical literature. The chalmugra treatment was superseded in the late 1930s and 1940s by sulfur drugs, the first class of antibiotics, and later by more effective antibiotic regimens. The technique became clinically obsolete, and with it, the name attached to it went quiet. Here is what I want you to hold on to. Holman fought back. In 1922, in print, in a peer-reviewed journal, he named her. He credited her chemistry by name. He stated on the record that Dean had added nothing, and it was not enough. Her name survived in that one paper for 50 years. It did not resurface through the scientific record correcting itself. It did not resurface because journals issued corrections or because professional bodies reviewed the attribution. It resurfaced because historians went looking. Science does not automatically recover buried names. That is not what science is for. What recovered Alice Ball was people, specific people, with specific questions, going into specific archives. Remember that distinction. It matters more than it sounds. In the 1970s, 2 professors at the University of Hawaii, Catherine Waddell Takara and Stanley Ali, were conducting research into the history of Black Americans in Hawaii. They were not looking for Alice Ball specifically. They went into the archives looking for a history, and they found her inside it. What they found was the paper trail Holman had left, and the gap where Dean's publications should have acknowledged her and did not. They began the work of reconstruction, documenting who Ball was, what she had done, and what had been done with her name. In the 1990s, Ali came across The Samaritans of Molokai, a 1932 memoir by Joseph Dutton, a volunteer at the Kalaupapa settlements, that referenced the contributions of a young chemist to the leprosy treatment there, without naming her. Ali identified her. Later, Ali connected with Paul Wormager, a University of Hawaii librarian who had been independently researching Ball since 1988. Together, they assembled the most complete account of her life and work that had ever existed. The University of Hawaii acknowledged Alice Ball formally in 2000, 85 years after her discovery. A plaque was dedicated at the campus's only chalmugra tree, behind Backman Hall. Lieutenant Governor Mazie Hirono declared February 29th Alice Ball Day. In 2007, the University of Hawaii Board of Regents awarded Ball the Regents Medal of Distinction, the university's highest honor. The same institution that had allowed her name to be erased eventually gave her its highest honor. That is not a contradiction. It is the full arc. And it only happened because people went looking. We began episode 1 with a question I did not state directly. I stated it through Ignaz Semmelweis and Alexander Fleming, and the 9 years nobody cared about penicillin. The question is this: what happens to the right idea when the wrong people control the record? Sometimes the idea survives anyway, because one surgeon in 1922 puts the right name in one paper. Because two professors go into an archive in the 1970s looking for something else and find her there. Because a librarian spends a decade on a question nobody asked him to answer. Alice Ball did not fail to receive credit because her science was weak. Her science was strong enough to free people from Kalaupapa. She did not receive credit because she died before she could publish. And the gap that left, unpublished, undocumented in her own hand, was filled by someone else's name. That is the mechanism. That is what this episode is about. The next episode of the Lab Rat Chronicles stays with the question this one raised and never quite closed. What happens when the person who does the work has no way to put their name on it? Alice Ball died before she could publish. The next man had no medical degree at all. He was a carpenter's son working as a laboratory assistant at Johns Hopkins, paid as a janitor. And he designed the surgical technique that saved children born with hearts that could not deliver oxygen to their own bodies. The surgeon who performed the operation received the credit, the recognition, and the place in the textbooks for 25 years. His name was Vivian Thomas. We will get to him next. I am Darwin. They never put my name in the paper, but I was there. History misplaced her, renamed her work, signed another man's name to it. But the record was kept. Her formula, as she wrote it, filed in the archive as Case File Number 4, the Ball Method. You will find it in the description, where her name belongs.